Welcome to Talking Technology with NCBI Labs, where we believe that technology is the single greatest enabler for people with sight loss and all disabilities. If you are interested in the latest technology news, products, and innovations, then you've come to the right place.
And hello, everybody. You're very welcome along to today's Talking Technology podcast from NCBI Labs. It's great to have you all here. Episode 18. And so today we've an action-packed show filled for you. Today's panel, we have myself, Daniel Dunn, and David Redmond, and Joe Lonergan, and JP Corcoran. And we'll be joined by our special guest, Matt Ater, who's Vice President of Enterprise Sales with Vispero, very shortly. So, in what's coming up today, today we are going to take a look at what's new with JAWS, ZoomText, and Fusion 2023, and also Apple AirTags versus the tile trackers. So which Bluetooth tracker should you buy? That's coming up later on in the show. So for the moment, you can send us your questions or comments to any of our panel members or our guests, and that can be sent to labs@ncbi.ie. Don't forget, you can also use the Q&A panel that's here if you're joining with us live here on Microsoft Teams. There's a Q&A panel where you can add your questions or comments to reach our guests. Okay, so we are delighted now to turn our focus to JAWS, ZoomText, and Fusion 23 with Matt Ater, who's from Vispero. So since its initial release in 1995, JAWS has evolved to become the screen reader of choice for millions of visually impaired computer users across the world. So we're delighted to welcome Matt, who is the Vice President of Enterprise Sales from Vispero, who produced the JAWS screen reader and ZoomText magnifier and Fusion, which combines both JAWS and ZoomText. And so Matt will share with us a bit of his background, talk to us about what's new in JAWS, ZoomText, and Fusion 2023, and demonstrate the new JAWS Smart Glance feature. So you're very welcome along to the show there, Matt. Hopefully you can unmute for us.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, actually. Yes, I believe it's still morning time with where you are. Would I be correct in saying?
Yes. Yep. And a morning of my wife told me a spectacular moon at I think it was around 5:30 this morning, my time. Yes. You guys probably had it earlier in the day.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a lunar eclipse, I believe.
Exactly. Yep.
Lovely. Makes for an interesting show today. So, so Matt, you're very welcome. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your role in Vispero.
Sure. I've been with Vispero since 2014. I came on board to start our we can call it compliance, web accessibility consulting division in 2014. Throughout that time, it was Freedom Scientific. Eventually, we grew both the business with the different acquisitions in the hardware and software space, adding ZoomText, adding Optilec, adding Enhanced Vision, and then of course in the consulting area we acquired the Paciello Group, Interactive Accessibility, and Always Accessible. So. And eventually now you'll refer to those as TPG Interactive. And so in my sector of the business, I focus on corporate-like customers, government-like customers. How do we bring our software and solutions to those customers to help them, people in the workplace be more efficient?
Yeah. Very good. So can you tell us maybe about the range of products from Vispero for people who are blind or who have low vision? So if you want to maybe just give us a
Sure.
tour of the product range.
Yeah, and most of them, the flagship product obviously is JAWS, ZoomText, and Fusion. They're the flagship products, and for those who don't know, Fusion's a combination of JAWS and ZoomText, so that an enterprise-like environment, it's easier for them to install Fusion because you're going to get all three products on the system. makes it a lot easier for corporate and government environments. Other products would be magnifiers, the Ruby on the Freedom Scientific side, Pebble from Enhanced Vision, Compact from Optelec, and then those are the handheld magnifiers, and then of course they go up to like a Topaz, a Merlin, and a Clearview on the desktop side, and there's ranges. I mean, it's amazing how many ranges of styles of screens and cameras there are in the market for low vision folks, because there's different purposes. One could be arts and crafts, one could be something in a classroom. Maybe you need to drag it with you in a suitcase, or maybe you need to put it in a pocket. And so those products, along with some Braille devices called the Focus Braille Display, OCR devices that do scan and read, and there's products in all three of the brands that do that. And then on the web accessibility space, we have tools such as JAWS Inspect. So it doesn't actually talk like JAWS does. It just runs reports on a web page to show you what JAWS would say. So that somebody who was testing websites and applications can get a report on what JAWS would report and share that with the development teams.
Very good.
There's also scanning software for scanning web pages and monitoring web pages, and color contrast analyzer, and lots of other kind of tools like that.
Excellent. So it's fair to say that you're not just a software company of the hardware offerings as well. You've so much stuff, which it really sounds like an incredible range of solutions available to the blind or visually impaired community.
Yeah, and it's the reason that there's such a good connection between the consulting arm and the product side is that people go to work and they need to still be able to do their job. And a lot of times we think about accessibility strictly from a website, like ordering a pizza or shopping on Amazon or something like that, when it's broader than that, because what happens when you get to the job and you need your technology to work? And so sometimes it's scripting, sometimes it's fixing applications at a company, and we have those consultative services that help an employer be successful with their hiring of people who are blind and low vision.
Absolutely. In a short while, we're going to talk about what's new in JAWS, ZoomText and Fusion 2023. But can you tell us maybe about some of the notable new features and improvements introduced to these products in recent years? Maybe some of the things that some of us might be familiar with, others might not. Convenient OCR, Picture Smart, and device assistants, like they've been recently introduced. So how have they been going?
So the like any new feature, it's all about discoverability. And so one of the nice things about the voice assistant is if you don't know how to do something, you can ask, right? If you just need to make it bigger and you don't know the keystroke in ZoomText to make it bigger, you can just speak to this to the voice assistant. And I'm not gonna, if I say it, it'll probably listen. So I'll probably steer away from saying the command. But you could say the command, say make it bigger, and it makes it bigger. And if you didn't know the keystroke was caps lock up arrow, then it just did it for you. And so part of the beauty of something like voice assistant is trying to make sure that we're reaching a customer that may be different than what we have today. And so I think that one's done really well. The OCR, convenient OCR, being able to OCR directly into Word, has been spectacular. People love it. It's just right click on a file, or Shift F10 applications key, whichever command you like to use, and say OCR to Word. And so those kinds of things have been really helpful. The ability to get image descriptions on the internet has been something that's been really liked. A couple of the things that I think that may not get as noticed, because again, it's about discoverability, and sometimes the command is just a keystroke, and if you use a different keystroke forever, you don't even think about it. So most people know when you're on a web page, you can press the letter N to go to like the next non-element, meaning like a block of text. and it looks for anything that's like 25 characters or more, and Shift N goes backwards. And you can set the length of what you're looking for in settings. But one of the things we added this past year or so was the ability inside of an email thread to move forward to the next email inside the body of the emails. And what that means is like if maybe there's 6 replies in the email.
Oh yeah.
And as a screen reader user, you have to, JAWS would stop at a link, then it's going to stop at the name, then it's going to stop at the next link. And so if there's 12 people copied, it takes 24 down arrows to move through just the names, forget the subject and the date.
Yeah.
And so the letter N jumps to the next message in the thread inside the body of that email. And so Shift N will go backwards. So I think this was a huge thing from a productivity point of view that we added, because and for those who use an iPhone, you would twist your fingers to the left and choose a message and then swipe down to go to the next message. And it's the same concept. How can you quickly get to it? So that was really a huge add. Adding the ability to split your audio. So we're in Teams today recording this, and you may be in Zoom, and maybe you want to have JAWS in one ear and have the phone call or conference call in the other ear. Or maybe you're watching a YouTube video and you want to have JAWS in one ear while you're taking notes on what you're listening to on the YouTube video. Maybe it's a training class or something like that, so you can split the audio. And so this is called balance, and it's under it's like insert space V and then the letter B. So it's insert space let go, V for voice or volume, and then B for balance, and then use your right or left arrow key to push the audio to that direction. If you did the same command and hit up arrow or down arrow, it will set it back to its normal balance. So those kind of things have, again, that came out of the fact that, when we went virtual like crazy during 2020,
we did.
We heard from people that they were challenged because not everybody had the Plantronics. I think Plantronics sells like a dual headset that splits the audio, but it does it with a regular phone, not like. And so people were buying 2 sound cards and wearing 2 headsets to split their audio, and it was just very complex. And so, and Windows took the balance control out, so it was hard to find. You can find it now, but it's not as simple. And this was just, hey, can we make it easier for the user? Under that same process, you can also do an insert space V for volume again, and then C for sound card, and just use your up and down arrow keys to move between sound cards. And you say, well, why do you need that? But I'm wearing a headset today. I want JAWS speaking in my headset, not in the speaker that I'm listening to you on. And so I can cycle that between whichever speaker or headset I'm using. Maybe I have Bluetooth also, and it's not switched. Well, you could go to JAWS, go to utilities, go to sound cards and arrow through them, but that takes time. And so this is a quick keystroke to cycle between those different sound devices. These are features, and in reality, there's a lot more that goes into the product, because we're having to support the operating system changes, the website changes, and all of those kinds of things. And when we think about back in the day when we used to have box software, and that's funny that we say that. Do you guys remember when we used to go to the store to buy Windows or Microsoft Office?
Yeah.
And that's not the way it works today, right?
And so,
and I know one of the challenges that people have is, how do we keep this stuff up to date? And I'll say this, that keeping your assistive technology up to date is just as critical as keeping your other products up to date, because we're doing the changes to support those products. And so Windows is changing every 6 months with security updates, other feature updates, whether it's Windows 10 or Windows 11. Same would go with the browsers, are changing every 4 to 6 weeks. And adding support for assistive technology and bug fixes that we then are supporting, because we're working side by side with the browser manufacturers. And the same goes with the productivity tools such as, Office, um, uh, Google Suite, Google Works, I think they call it now, or Workplace.
Yeah.
And those products are changing, very quickly too, and you don't even know they change, right? You just open it up and you get something new that day. And so, a lot of the work we're doing is to support those changes as well. So it used to be we'd have one big release like we just did, and there'd be, 10 features. And now we're seeing features, sent out throughout the year, because of the support we're having to do across all these productivity suites. And so, an example would be back in the spring, or summer, we added a feature called notification history, where you can go in and tell JAWS, I don't want to listen to those notifications. And an example would be, you're on Microsoft Edge, and if you pressed Alt left arrow to go back a page, which is the command to go back one page in the browser,
Yeah.
JAWS would say back because that's the keystroke. Okay.
Yes.
Edge would say going back. So you heard back going back. And that's Edge sending something to JAWS to say, and maybe you don't want to hear that. And so those types of notifications, you can go in and mute, you can change it to a sound, you can change the Braille output, if it's a notification that gets pushed in Braille. And when we talk about some of the new features that have been added, those have been enhanced in 2023.
Okay. Okay. So just going back there to the voice assistants, like, have there been popular introductions from the feedback? Sharky for JAWS and Zoomy for ZoomText. Have there been, feedback from? Has it been popular?
Yeah, and I think it depends on what people's needs are. They're more popular with a younger group that's not as familiar with all the keystrokes. They're very popular with teachers, parents, people who want to get something out of the product but haven't learned the 1,000 keystrokes that have been embedded in my brain for the last 25 years. And so as we all face every day, there's only so much room left in the brain, right?
Absolutely.
And I learned a new keystroke the other day for the first. I mean, I learn them every so often, right? And
yeah,
one of the things we have done is start posting what we call short tips on things. And this example of the voice assistant, how can you, maybe you want to do something and you didn't know the command. Well, we could teach you the keyboard command for that, or we could teach you the voice command for that. And those kinds of tips, combine those types of things. And I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it's, so from a perspective of the customers, I think it's when we add features, they're not always going to be for everybody.
yeah,
It's going to be for a group of people, and so then you sit back and say, well, why'd you add the feature, right? If it's only for 1 or 2 people or 10 people or 1,000 people or 100,000 people, you don't know until you release it. And then again, it goes back to, is it good for a workplace? Maybe not,
yes.
because, maybe you're sitting next to somebody and you can't use the voice assistant. Is it good for home? Probably. It's a good experience. But, having that flexibility of having these different tools have been really helpful. I think some people were probably a little frustrated that it didn't work well with Bluetooth. And so, from a microphone perspective, and this has to do with the way Microsoft manages power to Bluetooth. And so, there's challenges around that type of a solution to give voice commands to it.
Very good. Very good. So, what new features, let's bring it back, I suppose, to JAWS, ZoomText, and Fusion 23 now. What new features and improvements can we expect in this release that's on the way? Or maybe you could give us a demonstration. I know there's one new feature called Smart Glance. So maybe if you could give us a little demonstration as well as telling us about the others.
Yeah, I assume I can go ahead and do a demonstration here.
Fingers crossed now it works out.
All right, so I'm going to hit share, and And I will hopefully find the right window here. Let's see. All right, let's see. And we'll choose that.
Your screen.
All right, so I'm going to now.
Calendar, Microsoft Teams, talking technology with NCBI Labs.
Can you guys hear Jaws?
Microsoft Teams.
Yes, we can.
The Washington Post breaking
All
news
right.
and latest headlines.
So I'm sitting on the Washington Post
The Washington Post breaking news and latest
website,
headlines.
and most people would navigate, using a website using things like H for headings and R for regions, or bring up your list of links and search for whatever you're looking for. Well, this page is a perfect example of a page that has things that probably should have been headings. And because they're not tagged as a heading, if I press the letter H, I'm never going to find it. So I'll go ahead and press H.
Control of Congress at stake as voters head to polls, heading level 2 link.
All right, there's one.
The 5 big questions on election day 2022, heading level 2 link.
There's another one.
9 storylines we're watching tonight, heading level 2 link.
All right, and they're all heading level 2. So I'm going to go back to the top.
The Washington Post break.
And instead of hitting H, I'm going to hit the letter Y. And for those who used to use Y for, I think it was moved to span. It's not span anymore. It's going to be moved to Smart Glance. And so I'll go ahead and press it.
Upcoming live events.
And it said upcoming live events. This is probably should have been a heading on the page. Now, leave it to newspapers to not mark something as a heading because, they're probably thinking of articles as headings. But this is something that is, probably something that would have been marked properly as some heading level. Now I'm going to go ahead and press a Y again.
Upcoming live events.
All right.
Most read.
Yeah.
Most read.
Don't miss.
Don't miss.
For you.
For you.
For you.
Another for you.
Stay ahead of what's ahead.
Stay ahead what's ahead.
The 7 DMV.
And the 7 DMV, I assume it's DMV is DC, Virginia, DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I'll go ahead and press it again.
Listen now.
Listen now.
Wrapping the top. Upcoming live events.
And I'm back to the top. So those are things that should have been marked probably as a heading on the page because here's upcoming live events. If I press down,
link reader Q&A.
Reader Q&A.
Heading level 2 link chat with Alexandra Petri and tell her your jokes.
All right. So this is a perfect example of why somebody would have used a heading level. And because they didn't, I wasn't able to navigate to it. So adding Smart Glance, and you can edit your settings in Smart Glance inside Settings Center. In case you want to be having it look for something slightly different. It's based on things like font sizes that are different than the rest of the text on the page. So I'm not sure exactly. If I go back to it, let's go back to
upcoming live events.
Upcoming live events, and I'll press Insert F.
Font is bold Times New Roman 12 point.
So that's bolded, and that's why we probably jumped out and said, "Hey, this is something you wanted to pay attention to."
It's looking for something that's different to stand out on a page.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some pages it's not going to be useful for, like our version of one of our sporting events is Major League Baseball, and every team name is bolded. So it's probably a bad use case on certain pages. When the page loads, you're going to hear how many Smart Glance have been found on the page, and then you'll know whether or not you can use that command. I went to another page today and there was only one. So on this one, there happened to be about 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that. I didn't count. And I could bring up a list with, I think it's Insert Control Y. It's a terrible keystroke.
The Washington Post breaking news and latest.
We all have to be piano players to do these keystrokes. And it says
upcoming live events 1 of 8.
There's 8. So and now it's a list.
Most read 2. Don't miss 3. For you 4 of 8. Well plus being tips and guide.
So pretty straightforward. I'll hit escape to get out.
Escape.
And I'm back to the regular web page. And that's the same as like getting a list of links, getting a list of tables, things like that.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So that's a lovely extra feature. So it's looking for the bits that might have been missed before.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Yep.
Brilliant. So is there other new features and improvements in JAWS 2023 that you think are worth mentioning here?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the one we just showed, the Smart Glance, is probably going to be the most used, and it's going to be across JAWS and Fusion. Another one is called regular expressions that are part of the history notifications history. So if I do an insert space and then hit the letter N.
Notification history. Recent notifications list box. No new notifications. Windows 9:26 a.m. 1 of 29.
All right. So this is a list of the most recent notifications, and what regular expressions do is allows me to say, when you get an email notification in your computer, it says something like new Outlook notification, email from JP, and it's the subject and the date and maybe a couple lines of the text. I mean, it's noisy. And so the idea behind this notifications history is to reduce some of that noise. And I could take that entire thing and say, new message from JP, and that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I can reorder the what's said and put it in the proper order. And if anybody wants to see a demo, I would look back at the most recent FS cast. Glenn Gordon did a wonderful demonstration of this. It's in the podcast. You can listen to that in any of your smart devices. You can also get it straight from the JAWS menu system as well. But he did a great demonstration on how to do it. It is complex when you do regular expressions. It's not for everybody. So simple notification management is easy. If I wanted to mute the one that just came up, I could easily just go in here and create a new rule. Let's see what happens.
Enable rules checkbox checked. Create rule ... button.
So there's a create rule button. All I do is tab until I get to it, and I can, and inside that rule for this one notification, I can say mute, change sound, and those kind of things. But if you get into regular expressions, it's way more advanced than some users can handle. So that's available both in JAWS and Fusion.
Brilliant.
The one that's new for ZoomText in Fusion is called tethered mode, and this is really important. I can't demo it here, so I'm going to just describe it for you.
Okay.
Just partially because it's hard to demo a low vision feature that doesn't have speech associated to it. So I'm going to quickly just stop sharing.
Speech on demand.
If I go back here and stop sharing. Okay, I think I stopped sharing. So tethered mode, one of the things that impacts folks with low vision is that we only see one thing at a time. And what I mean by that is if I'm in the start menu and I'm using ZoomText or Fusion and I start typing and I'm running at like 6x magnification, all I see is what I'm typing because that's where the edit field is, okay, on the screen. But what it's finding is all the way at the top of the start menu. It's not near where I'm typing, okay? It's out of the viewpoint. And so the tethered view actually brings that into the view. So that while you're typing, you will see what it's found along with what you're typing. And this is really important for people with low vision to be able to see that. The two other examples of where you can find this today, and we're going to, based on customer feedback, we'll add additional ways to do this, and people can customize their own tether views. But one is that when you're in Excel and you land on a formula, you'll see a little symbol where you can click it and it'll show you the formula right above the cell of that formula. So, you know, it may say $26,000, but that little symbol indicates it's a formula. You can then just click that symbol and you'll see the formula of what that cell is. And so it allows you to bring the view rather than take your mouse and scroll all the way up to the top of the window.
Yeah.
The other place you'll see this is in links list for Fusion. You know, you'll see a link and right below it, you'll see the actual address of the link, which is actually for a JAWS user or a Fusion user. They could press insert page down to read the bottom of the links list window, and that reads the web address of that link. Well, this brings it into the viewport so that somebody with low vision doesn't have to scroll to the bottom to look at that link. And those are three examples that I've seen it being used, and I think these are perfect examples of trying to solve a problem.
I like that one with the link because often, you know, maybe you got a spam email or something, and you know, click here for whatever, and next thing you realize, hold on now, that's not sending me back to the website it's purporting to be coming from. So it will help people with security as well, I think.
Yeah, and that's it. It's funny you say that, but it's something that we added in JAWS a couple of years, maybe a year or so ago, was the ability to actually get the address of a link before you choose it. So like, for example, in an email, wouldn't you like to know where that's going to send you before you click it? And I'm pretty sure it's like insert F1 will do it. I'm not sure if insert tab will do it, but having the ability to get that quickly is really useful for people. Oh, I think it's insert. Yeah, this is gonna be another terrible keystroke. I think it's insert control F7 will do it. So good luck on enough fingers for that one.
Yes.
Again, I think this is part of the challenge of why, how many keystrokes we have left. But I think insert F1 is probably a quick way to do it. If you land on a link and you want to know where it goes, press insert F1 and it brings it up. I forgot a keystroke that was added, or I shouldn't say added, but a feature that was added recently was when you're in a save or open dialog box and you're in the edit field where you're trying to type a name of a file, but you want to know what folder that's being saved to, insert tab will read the folder information for you. And so this is also challenging because it's like 7 shift tabs or tabs away just to get to that edit box to know where something's being saved. And so the insert tab will read that for you.
Brilliant. That's a great feature addition.
And good luck on remembering all these, because like I said, there's 1,000 keystrokes out there, whatever. The one that I learned yesterday was you can get the row and column number or jump to a row and column number with a keystroke. So if you're in a table on the web and you want to go to cell, let's see, column 2, row 3, you can press a keystroke to jump right to it, which I think is insert control. Alt Control J, maybe? No, that can't be that. It's got to be insert Control J. That'd be funny if it was, right?
It would.
Because that actually launches JAWS. Sorry, everybody. But I'd have to look up the keystroke. Sorry. But there is a command, jump to a specific cell coordinate, which I had no clue. And this is why the community of the JAWS users sharing information has been so key, because there are things that are just so long ago were created, and it's like, wow, you could do that.
Yeah. Oh, it's brilliant. And all these extra features, and they sound very good, and it's great to see these coming on stream now. So we've kind of covered in what's new in JAWS 2023, and we've briefly touched on some of the new features of ZoomText 2023. Is there anything else in there for ZoomText 2023 users, or anything specific either for Fusion?
I'm sure there is. I don't know all the features. I mean, there was some enhancements made for specific. This was a big fix that had to be done. Was around Dell had a WaveMax audio driver, and it was causing memory leaks, so that when the screen reader was talking, it basically ate up all the memory. And so we had to go around and solve that problem. And so there's been some changes just for the synthesizers to be able to support a problem around that.
Okay, so it's kind of one of the big bug fixes that have.
Oh, huge bug fix, because it was affecting any Dell user with WaveMax audio. Wow. And what the WaveMax audio does is detect when you plug in headphones, like into the 3.5 millimeter jack headphone, it says, is this a microphone or a headset?
That's right. Yeah.
And if you don't have that software running, then it won't switch. So it's actually a big impact.
It is, yeah, and specifically, I suppose, for screen reader users, with that in mind. So, is the 2023 suite JAWS Fusion and ZoomText available? And if so, where can they be got?
Yeah, they just go to the freedomscientific.com website, and right under downloads, you can choose any of the products, and it's been available for a couple weeks now.
Oh, brilliant. And question in here from one of our listeners. How often do you recommend users upgrade their version of JAWS, ZoomText or Fusion? Would it be every year, every 2 years, etc.?
I say every 6 weeks. And the reason goes back to the whole compatibility with everything you're using.
Yeah.
Your software is pushing updates, every 4 to 6 weeks when it comes to your productivity tools and like your browsers and things like that. And so if you're not keeping up to date, you're going to find issues. And I think this is a good example.
Well, they're the updates, but would you, let's say somebody on a previous version of JAWS in upgrading, how often would you recommend to cycle their upgrade?
Well, I think it falls into the same pattern because, we're doing bug fixes and we only will have one more release of 2022. So and I think a good example is Teams. If somebody's sitting back on JAWS 2019 and they're trying to use Teams today, they're probably going to struggle. And it's not because we've done something wrong, but Teams is changing so frequently that we're doing a lot of work to keep up with it. And it's possible like a version of JAWS didn't even support Teams.
Yeah.
And so I see people in companies even today that are sitting back on older versions and struggling. And I sit back and say, well, how am I supposed to help you? Your company should keep it up to date. Now, from a home user perspective, maybe you're not using Teams, maybe you're only using an older version of Outlook, or you just want to browse the web and it doesn't affect you. You may take a couple of years to keep things up to date. I still would recommend keeping it up to date though, because we're having to do lots of changes with Windows 11, with Windows 10 still today as well.
Okay. So that kind of covers the question I had. Are there compatibility issues customers should be mindful when using an older version of JAWS and that, or with Windows 10 and 11? So yeah, you kind of got two birds with the one stone with that one there. Just another observation. In a while ago, Vispero, they introduced a way for customers in the USA to obtain home versions of JAWS and ZoomText via yearly subscriptions. Is this software as a service model likely to come to Ireland or Europe in the near future?
So part of the reason it hasn't is the support model. Today, our support model works for us well in the US because we provide technical support in the United States. We're available during normal hours. We have distribution in the United States. We handle that. Whereas in other countries, our distribution is managed by our dealers and resellers. And so an example in the UK is going to be Sight and Sound. And so we rely on them to distribute, support, provide training. And so at this time, I don't know when we would be adding that kind of solution to other geographies, just due to the fact that, we need to ensure that our distribution can continue to provide support for people in those countries.
Very good. Very good. So there's nothing concrete planned yet.
Correct.
Okay. And are you guys working on any other software products maybe that don't fit into typical JAWS, the flagship products, JAWS and Fusion and ZoomText? Is there other software products out there that we might not be aware of?
Well, I think this one you may not be aware of, but I think it's kind of cool is we have a version of JAWS that can go on a self-service kiosk. Today it's in the McDonald's kiosks in the United States, and eventually it'll get around the world for other geographies as well. And so that will be, we have that in probably, I want to say it's somewhere around 25,000 installs today around the United States. And we also have it on places like Carnival cruise ships and Holland America ships and some of the ones that are under the Carnival brands, so that somebody can walk up and use like a library-like kiosk or a computer if they wanted to browse the internet, print out their boarding passes, things like that. And so you're going to see more of that because of the self-service industry
Yes.
is really expanding. And so you can, the one thing I'll warn you is that you have to bring your headphones with you, just like an ATM. And you know, how many people today don't carry headphones in their pocket? I don't know. I carry them. I usually have 2 or 3 pairs in my bag at all times. But you know, some people may not be carrying headphones, and so just, you know, keep that in mind, that if you run into a headphone jack on something like that, plug them in, and it could be JAWS running on it.
Brilliant. That's yeah, that's as exciting as well, and it opens up you know, opens up all these new self-service checkouts and things like that. You know, for people to be able to use them in going forward if this gets fully deployed, I can imagine.
Yeah, and if you think of the challenges that a lot of people have had around self-service, like, you know, you go to the grocery store and you swipe your you know, can of beans, and it tells you the amount, but it doesn't tell you what you just swiped, right?
Yeah.
And you get to the end, it says put in your card, but it doesn't tell you what your, you know, maybe your total is. It doesn't tell you all the stuff that's happening on the screen. And I think that's the challenge that people are faced with, is that this self-service technology, and a good example is, you know, we have the Powerball over here, and I don't know if anybody won it last night, but it was, you know, if I won it, I don't know why I'm on this call right now, because I should be, you know, jumping up and down. But you know, that machine was not accessible at the grocery store yesterday. So I had to have somebody else come in and choose it. And I don't know if they chose things correctly until I get home and have someone else read it. At the bottom of the machine in Braille, it says ask for assistance. Now it's like all the way down by my shin. Now, how many people take their hand and feel all the way down at the bottom of the machine to find the Braille instructions to say ask for assistance?
Yes.
And, you know, then you get to a place where there's only one attendant in a gas station, and that device isn't accessible. And that's an unfortunate thing that we need to solve for, is the self-service kind of market needs to be more accessible today.
Absolutely. I agree with you, hand and heart there. I'm going to bring in my colleague David, who's one of our panelists here today. Sorry, I kind of hogged a lot of the questions, and then David has a question for you. So David, Matt.
Thank you. Matt, how are we, first of all? So I guess I was a JAWS user for many years, but I haven't used JAWS in quite a while. The last version I used was 8.0 on good old Windows XP. And one of the reasons I haven't, I guess, jumped back into JAWS on the Windows side is something you alluded to yourself. It's the vast amount of keystrokes and having to effectively relearn that at this point. Is that something that, you know, you see evolving, the kind of keystroke model that you're using for your software to simplify that? I know there have been products, third-party scripts and such for JAWS that have tried to simplify it somewhat, but is this something that you could see Vispero looking into in the future in terms of really trying to simplify, even if it was, say, for a lighter version of JAWS or something?
So I think that when I look at what I use every day, I probably use 20 commands. So even though there may be 1,000 keystrokes out there, and I could probably, I think once I did a game show on Clubhouse once called Name That Keystroke, and challenge people with commands. And you know, people did know them, but it was actually a lot of fun. But I would say that, you know, learn the commands you need to know and use those. And then that's where, you know, something like the voice assistant comes into play, because you can, you know, have it do something for you. There's also a command for command search where you can actually type in what you want to do, and it tells you the commands for those things. And so that's an insert space followed by the letter J, and you can type in whatever you want. And so if I wanted to know the table reading commands, I just type the word table, and it's context sensitive to the application you're running. So if you're in Word or Excel or the browser, it gives you that. But if I'm sitting on a website today, I use H for headings, I use R for regions, and pretty much everything else is, I don't use the other keystrokes. And so, and now I'm using Y because that's a new feature, but I don't know that I use that many keystrokes. Like I said, probably about 20. And so if you ask the general user, what do they do every day? It's probably less than 20 keystrokes.
And in that case, then, like, I remember many years ago, and I don't know whether it still exists, but there used to be a ZoomText keyboard. I know this existed when AI Squared was independent, and I don't know whether it still exists now, but
it does. Yeah,
it does. Have you ever considered something along those lines on the JAWS side, whereby you could, for example, map, common keystrokes to, for example, if you want to open the links list, for example, on this is something that someone might want to do every day, that you could do it in a, one hand keystroke instead of necessarily requiring two hands, because there are going to be people who may have RSI, they may have repetitive strain injury or other conditions where using something like a 3-finger keystroke, that might necessarily be difficult. And as you admitted yourself, using something like the voice assistants isn't necessarily always practical.
Yeah, and I'm not, I don't know if anybody's done the mapping on the ZoomText keyboard for the different JAWS commands for Fusion, but I think it's a good example of where we could go when we had the Magic keyboard for Magic, when we used to have the Magic software. A lot of those commands were on the keyboard. So you had a links list button, you had a volume button, a speed button, that kind of stuff. So I don't see a reason why we couldn't. What I would rather do is probably find a mainstream keyboard or some mainstream keyboards that have the ability to assign commands. There's my keyboard has a button for the internet, it has a button for Outlook, and maybe I don't want those. Maybe I want those to be JAWS commands.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah.
And that's smarter than me trying to build a keyboard and charging, $150 for a keyboard when, there's probably something on the market today that's easier to configure.
No, that's fair. That's very valid. Sure. Thanks a million for the info anyway. I appreciate that. It's an interesting area because it is, at times it can seem kind of daunting to jump back into JAWS after, using other screen readers or whatever the case may be for many years.
Yeah, and I think transferring between operating systems is traditionally the hardest change. So if you're a Mac user moving to Windows, the commands are totally different. And for me to go jump and use a Mac is a lot of work. For me to go jump and use an iPhone is no big deal, but jumping into a Mac is a lot more work for me because I know, JAWS commands and my fingers automatically go to those commands. So, but if you're jumping between Windows screen readers, for the most part, a lot of them have emulated the JAWS commands because those have been the most popular. The ones who didn't, eventually they added a JAWS layer command so that everybody could learn, from JAWS, and it was easier for training centers to teach and things like that.
I know like ZoomText came to the Mac and then I don't believe that's a product now, but do you ever see the likes of JAWS, ZoomText Fusion ever coming back to other platforms, maybe the Mac, but also maybe newer platforms? I know people are, looking at new areas like virtual reality and so on that are at this stage almost completely inaccessible. So is that an area you see the company going in down the road, perhaps?
Yeah, I would not expect it on the Mac, and it's a lot to do with the fact that, we can't, the ZoomText for the Mac was very limited because we couldn't touch the system like we could in Windows. In terms of other systems, we'll do it for specific markets. I could see virtual reality being an example where we're obviously doing it in the kiosk space or the self-service space, and so you'll see it on other platforms in that space. For the end user at home, probably not, just because it's, in the platforms we're talking about, it's about customizing a user experience that's very flat and it's very controlled. But when we start jumping into supporting an end user, there's there's some free stuff on some of the other platforms today, like iOS and Android and stuff like that.
Sure, that makes sense. Fantastic. Well, thanks so much. I'll hand it back over to you, Daniel.
Yeah,
thank you.
I think Joe has a question for you as well, Matt.
Hi, Matt. My name is Joel Lonergan. I'm an IT trainer with NCBI. Yeah, the one feature I really loved that you included was you spoke about it a small bit already, is the notification center. Insert space, then end for notifications. I think that'll change a lot of blind and vision impaired people's lives going forward, especially since the change to virtual working, like working through Zooms and Teams especially. You can get rattled with hundreds of notifications if you're in an hour or 2 hour meeting, and some of them can go over your head and you don't know where did that come from. At least now with JAWS you can do the insert space end keystroke and go back through all the notifications you might have missed. I think that's a real game changer.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's funny. I actually wanted to call it something different. I wanted to be the noise controller, but nobody would
Oh
let
yeah,
me name it.
that's true. Yeah, the quietener, noise controller, good. The silencer maybe. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, so I think that's going to change. I only recently started using it, but I find it a real game changer going forward, especially for anyone working from home. So I just wanted to make that point. I think also we have a service user on the line, Robert. If you're there, I think you had a question earlier about reporting JAWS issues.
Robbie, yeah. Control Shift M, Robbie, for mute and mute. You should be allowed to.
Can you hear me there now?
We can indeed.
Yeah, we
How you
can.
doing,
Go ahead,
Matt?
Robbie.
Yeah, how you doing? Sorry, I'm late into the meeting. I'm just wondering, is there any talk or progress on the technology, JAWS, and the development of JAWS going forward to work with the likes of applications such as SAP or CRM or other kind of big applications that big businesses would use? As I personally work for a large company, and I've had a lot of trouble with SAP in the past. It has been programmed with JAWS, updates happen, the JAWS programming has been kicked off. So I'm just wondering, is there any thought around that or going forward?
Well, I think it'd be good to have you reach out to us. The guys here can provide my contact information for you.
Okay.
We've done lots of projects around SAP. SAP is obviously a huge program with lots of modules, and so some are being run through like Citrix platforms and they need to be installed correctly. Some are using the web view, some are using the desktop view, and so we need to understand what's the setup. We did a large project with a Department of Defense here in the United States because they use SAP for all of their inventory control.
Right.
And we wrote a lot of it was around training documentation because they had created keystrokes, but it goes back to the noise factor for me. When I was using it, it was stuff like you always had to press F4 to open up things, and so there could be some compatibility stuff. It could be there was and this has been about 7 years since we did that project. There was a command like for screen reader mode that you had to have enabled on the back end. And so I think, again, we'd have to get back in it with SAP and see what's going on. But they have an accessibility division. They own licenses of JAWS, so I'd be surprised that they're not trying to solve the things. I think it's just a question if we can get the right documentation for it.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, the reason being because there's a company in London called Blazy. I'm probably aware of them.
Yep.
And Tony Bergen, he's programmed a lot of stuff, within SAP, but then there's updates because security and stuff like that within the company, and it just wipes it all off then, So I'm just wondering, down the road, would there be standard kind of commands that would work with JAWS, that where it wouldn't have to be programmed and security updates wouldn't wipe it,
Yeah, I think it comes down to a relationship with that company to make it happen. And that's the beauty of the TPG Interactive Group, is that they have relationships with companies like SAP. I don't think they have SAP today, but we can reach out to them.
Yeah,
the key is to embed some of those things like we do with Microsoft. You'll find, we have lots of things from Microsoft and Google products and other products as well that are tweaks within our software to help support their environments.
Fantastic. All right, thanks a million.
So,
that's music to my ears.
So Matt, before we finish up, if somebody like Robert or any service user wants to report an issue or a bug or we'll say recently, we'll say Quick Assist stopped working, and that was a big issue for JAWS users. If someone to report something like that to you, Matt, or to Freedom Scientific, what do they do?
Well, there's a couple ways. One is support@freedomscientific.com or support@vispero.com, vispero.com. That's the best way to do it. There is a once you have a ticket, sometimes they'll ask for a capture of your settings and things like that, and get your versions. And there's a support tool within JAWS to do that, so you don't have to go through and copy down all the versions and things like that. So I would start with that, because that's what they're there for. And our distribution, like Sight and Sound, they also do support. They would open a ticket with us, and they've done that recently with an application, so they're familiar with doing that as well for you.
Thanks very much, Matt.
Very good, very good. Yeah, no, that's after being a very interesting discussion, Matt. Some lovely developments coming along. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Matt, maybe just before we finish up this segment of the show?
No, I think this has been good. I appreciate it.
Brilliant. So yeah, thanks very much, Matt. So for joining us on the show today, and to Robbie as well for joining us as well. It's been great to discuss all that. And so next, what we're going to do in the show is we're going to move on to our next topic, which is the tech review, our Apple AirTags versus the tile trackers. So I'm going to introduce now JP and David to take us through the Apple AirTags and tile trackers. Welcome, lads.
Thank you, Daniel. Stuff. I know David has prepared a video demonstration on the AirTags, which we're going to share a link to in the podcast description. So it's worth checking that out for anyone who would like to know how to set up an AirTag with VoiceOver on their iPhone. So definitely worth checking that out, which we will share the link to, let's say, after this podcast is recorded. Just to start with, David, Apple AirTags, what exactly are these?
Yeah, so Apple AirTags and tile trackers, they're similar devices, but they do have some differences. Basically, what they are is little trackers that you can put on things or in things. So in your wallet, on your magnifier, on devices that you might potentially lose or might need to find in a hurry. And generally what they let you do is both track them using an app. So if they got lost, you could track them using an app. So Tile have their own app, and Apple use the Find My app, which is built in to the iPhone and other Apple products. But also they oftentimes let you play a sound. So for example, if you needed to find your wallet and you just don't know where it is, what you can do is you can get it to play a sound. You can tell Siri to get it to play a sound, or you can do that from the Find My app. So they're basic little trackers to help you find items, I guess.
Okay. Excellent. So if someone's shopping around for a Bluetooth tracker, chances are, from what you're saying, they're probably be choosing between either an AirTag or a tile tracker. Would they be the two most popular brands on the market?
There are others, but yes, AirTag and Tile are the most common. And I guess just to go through the slight differences with them, JP. So an AirTag, I guess, there is one design of AirTag. Imagine €3 coins stacked on top of each other. It's a small little disc almost, just a tiny little thing. But tiles, they come in all different shapes and sizes. So there are ones, for example, that are designed and shaped like a credit card, or there are ones designed as stickers that you might be able to stick to items, so on. So there is a little more, I guess, flexibility with the tile design, and the tile tends to be a bit cheaper depending on the version you're going with. But the advantage that the Apple AirTags have is that they can send their location to any iPhone. They don't rely on the Tile network. So if it gets lost, You're not relying on another user with a tile to find it. Because everyone has iPhones,
Yes.
so it means that signal can get back to you, so you can find your item a bit easier. And yeah, just the integration with the Find My app and stuff like that, it does generally make life a bit easier. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both.
I see.
But yeah, that's for you to decide yourself, I guess.
And what about then the initial setup, David? So setting up an AirTag versus setting up a tile. I know you are an iPhone user.
I am indeed.
So how did you find the experience setting up the AirTag versus the tile tracker?
So again, this is an area that it's going to vary. The AirTag setup, because Apple make both the AirTag and the iPhone, the AirTag setup for me as an iPhone user is simpler, because it was literally a case of holding the AirTag close to the device, and it automatically knew there was a pop-up. So if you've ever used, for example, AirPods or devices like that before, it works in the same way. But with Tile, you have to download an app, you have to create an account, you have to kind of onboard the Tile. There's a bit more of a process involved. It's relatively accessible. It's not perfect. The Tile app is not perfect. It's relatively accessible. But generally, the AirTag experience is much easier. Now, keep in mind that if you are an Android user, a tile might be your only option. So that again is something that you have to decide for yourself. But it is an advantage if you're an iPhone user. It might be worth it. That setup process is much smoother with an AirTag.
Interesting. And you mentioned a moment ago about the different types and shapes of tile trackers. Interesting one looks like a credit card. I presume that goes in your wallet in case you lose your wallet. Is that the idea?
That is the idea. Yeah, there are loads of different ones. So there's, and they'll have different features. So, one of the ones I had before was a little sticker. So it was like a tiny little sticker that my great idea was that I would stick it to my magnifier. Unfortunately, it didn't work because the handle is kind of curved, and the area that you could stick it on just simply wasn't big enough. So there are considerations. They're small, but also they won't stick on everything. But there are, different shapes. Yes, the credit card shaped one would fit in a wallet. And there are other designs for maybe clipping onto stuff, for example.
And then when it comes to the AirTags, it's probably a different kind of principle there, is it? Because if you're talking about having something the size of a €2 coin, or at least 3 €2 coins stacked together, is there the option to buy accessories? Like, for example, if you wanted to put them on a keychain or a luggage tag, can you purchase accessories with these AirTags?
Yeah, you can, and you can do the same with the Tile devices, to be fair, as well. So there are accessories. Some are from Apple, some are third-party ones. You will find there is more of a third-party market with the AirTags because it's just a bigger market size. But they can be, some are quite affordable, some are pretty expensive. But there is a very wide selection of accessories for your AirTags to, put them on your keys or attach them to things.
Yeah, and what about then, David, focusing on the AirTag for a moment? Let's say, for example, you said the battery is replaceable. When it comes to the point where you do need to replace it, maybe it could be a year, is it perhaps?
They say around 3 years, I believe. 3 years,
yeah. Okay. Have you got to that stage? Have you needed to replace
I haven't. No, I haven't needed to replace the battery yet.
Well, that's good. Okay, so it's obviously quite long lasting, but at least we know we can replace them if we need to.
We can, and that's an issue generally with the tiles that people do run into. Like, I have run into an issue with tile trackers where the batteries have run out, and because they're non-replaceable, your only option is to purchase new ones, and that is a big disadvantage. Where, like, if you are purchasing an AirTag, 3 years down the line, you might only need to purchase a battery replacement. You might not need to get the whole thing again.
The whole thing.
So that is something to factor into the cost of these devices. That you might need to replace it. And the life cycle of the battery on the tile devices is short. In fact, it's actually artificially shortened, which is interesting, that they will automatically stop working after a certain length of time, whether the battery is dead or alive. I don't know why that is, but that is the case.
Programmed obsolescence or something, isn't it? It's almost going into that kind of
Sure.
category,
And they're open about it. That's not me being a
yeah.
conspiracy theorist.
Okay.
They're quite open that is how it works.
It just lasts that length of time. Interesting.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I can see there's a lot of pros and cons with both trackers. One final question, David. Apple AirTag or Tile Tracker, which wins over, do you think?
For me, I'm firmly in the AirTag camp at this point, for a few reasons. I mean, the battery thing with the tiles was a big one for me, and also the fact that I guess the full network, or the Find My network, the ease of use, that sold me. Now, it's not perfect. Like, one of the things that I mentioned earlier was my mission to get some form of tracker for a magnifier, and that's still something I haven't been able to crack yet. So they're not perfect for everything, and that is something that you do need to keep in mind. But yes, for me, I'm firmly in the AirTag camp for now.
Okay, great. Well, really appreciate taking us through your experience with both Bluetooth trackers, David. And again, we'll be sharing the link to that video in the description of this podcast. So many thanks, David. And back over to you, Daniel.
JP.
Thanks very much, guys, for that. Yeah, very, very interesting. I didn't know that about the battery, David, and the tile tracker. So I have my own one now, a good few months. So how long have I left?
I think they generally last about a year. So your doomsday is coming. Your doomsday is coming, unfortunately. You'll get a notification on your app to tell you when it's going to happen.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Okay, thanks for that. That's great news, I think. So moving on then, that's after being a great discussion, and thanks very much to everyone for that. And we've pretty much come to the end of our show, so we'll just go through our support lines. Should you need any assistance or technology support, you can contact us. Free phone, it's 1-800 911 110. That's 1-800 911 110. Or you can drop us an email, labs@ncbi.ie. If there's any general support you would like away from the technology, NCBI's main support line, 1-800 911 250. That's 1-800 911 250. Or alternatively, drop an email to info@ncbi.ie. So don't forget, you can also support NCBI services. It's a visit to donate.ncbi.ie online. So that's donate.ncbi.ie online. And coming up in our next few shows, we'll be discussing product reviews, such as buying a new phone, what you need to know when buying refurbished tech. And also Sarah Herlinger, Apple Senior Director of Global Accessibility Policy and Initiatives, will be joining us. So they're all in upcoming shows, and our next show will be broadcast on Tuesday, November the 22nd, 2022. And we look forward to having you along with us then. In the meantime, you can keep up to date with all things technology through our newsletter, which goes out every Friday, and you can sign up for that on our website at www.ncbi.ie, or alternatively, drop us an email, labs@ncbi.ie, and we'll add you to the mailing list. So once again, thanks for listening, and thanks to Joe, David and JP, our panelists, and Robbie and Matt, who joined us on the show today, which was very interesting. And we look forward to speaking to you all again on the next episode of Talking Technology from NCBI Labs. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Talking Technology podcast with NCBI Labs. If you would like to support our show, you can visit donate.ncbi.ie. The NCBI Labs Talking Technology podcast is proudly sponsored by IA Labs, the market leader in the provision of digital accessibility services.